Hi, it's Ken from Skynet. In this video, we're going to continue our discussion of the Cogent DataHub version 11 security model. And specifically, we're going to practice creating custom data permissions that allow us to restrict a user account to a specific data domain or maybe a couple data domains. As we've discussed previously, each principal is assigned to 0 or more roles, and each role has a unique name and assigned permission sets. We can create custom roles and permission sets to give specific access to these data domains or data domain patterns. So in this scenario, we are going to add a user account with data permissions for two particular data domains, the data PID and data SIM domains, which are created when we run the data PID and data SIM data simulation programs that ship with the Cogent DataHub. So let's just start the Cogent DataHub. And while that is starting up, I will also start the data PID program, and we can see that that will connect as soon as DataHub is running. So we can see that data PID is connected. We can also have a look at the event log and confirm that the connection was established from TCP. We can also look at our data browser and confirm that we see data updating in the DataHub. So let's configure a brand new user account that is going to allow us to restrict permissions. So I'm going to create a new built-in account, and I will give that account the name of SIM Data User. And for simplicity, I'm going to give it a password of test. We obviously should use something a bit more cryptic. I am not going to require TOTP authentication because there is no mechanism when using DataPID program to actually put in the TOTP code. This should really only be used when we have an interactive account. Yes, it's a trivial password, but I'm not going to worry about it for the purposes of this demonstration. I'm also going to add this user account to the all data reader role, and I'll apply those changes. So we should now be able to go back to our data PID program and specify the SIM data user credential and the password of test and reconnect. That will successfully connect to the DataHub, but you'll notice that when we look at the event log, we have lots of permission denied errors. And that's because every time the SIM data user account attempts to write data to the DataHub, it's of course being denied. And the reason it's being denied is because this account only has read access to all data domains, and we need write access. And of course, if we look at the data browser again, we see that that's not currently connected. No data is updating. So what we want to be able to do here is to create a new role that allows us specific access to the data PID data domain. So we're going to go back to our SIM data user account and remove that from the all data reader role. And instead, we're going to add a new role that I will call SIM data writer role. And we are going to add the data full access permission set. And we're going to configure that specifically so that it has access to the data PID data domain. I'm not going to use a regular expression right now. Instead, I want to specifically provide access to that data PID data domain. Data domain patterns are case sensitive. So let's come back to here and once again select SIM data writer role as that member. I'll apply that change, and we can see now that the SIM data user account has a single principal, the default principal. We'll come back to that later. And it does have access to basic connectivity and the SIM data writer role. So let's come back to DataPid and disconnect and reconnect and confirm that the event log now shows that the most recent request to connect has been accepted, that connection that was established. And if we look at the data browser, we can see that data is now being updated in the DataHub for the DataPid domain. Let's try to start data sim and see what happens with that. So I'm going to come back over to here and start data sim. Of course, it is connected because it's using internal TCP, but again, I want to use the sim data user with a password of test, reconnect on that. And again, if we look at the event log, we can again see that data sim data is not being written to the DataHub, permission denied errors, because at this point, this account only has access to the DataPid domain, and we need it to have access to DataPid or DataSim. So let's go back to the DataSim, the SIM data writer role, and we're going to modify that. In this particular case, I'm going to use the example of using a regular expression, and for the sake of illustration, I'm going to say that I want this role to allow access to any data domain that begins with the word data and then includes 1, 2, 3 additional characters, and that constitutes the entire data domain regular expression or data domain pattern. So data PID and data SIM will be accepted. Let's hit apply on that. Come back to our user interface and confirm that that has successfully updated there. And now when we come back to data sim and re-enter that and reconnect and have a look at our event log, we can again see that the connection was established. And when we look at the data browser, we can see that not only data PID is updating, but data sim data is also updating correctly. We can further restrict the access by using a distinct principal. So right now, I've got the any interface, any IP address principal. And what I'd like to do is remove that principal from the SIM data writer role, perhaps instead just giving it the all data reader role. And instead, we're going to add a new IP pattern and a new principal here specifically for localhost, which represents the IP address 127.0.0.1. And I'm going to choose the TCP interface. So only connecting over TCP from that IP address is going to represent this principal. And we're going to again select the SIM writer data writer role for that. So you can see here that this principal would provide read access to all data domains, whereas the principal that comes in via a TCP connection request on the localhost account will have access to any data domain that begins with the word data and includes 3 additional letters. So we should again be able to, for example, disconnect and reconnect data PID, and I'll do the same thing here. I will disconnect and reconnect data SIM. We'll look at our event log, and we can see that those connections did successfully reestablish. And when we look at our data viewer, we can see that data PID data is updating correctly and data SIM is updating correctly. And just in passing, to confirm that this is actually working, I'm going to just make a modification to this IP address here just to show you that it actually is working correctly. If I change this IP pattern to match the specific IP address of 127.0.0.2 and hit OK and hit apply on that, and then attempt to disconnect and reconnect, you can see that the account no longer is able to connect. And that's because there is no match, an exact match on that particular account. And so if we look at our data PID data, we can see that that is not updated. Data SIM is still updating because at this point, I did not disconnect that previous connection and reconnect. And so the permissions were granted at the time the connection was established a few minutes ago. Let's come back and just fix this principle so that it's working correctly. I will apply that change, come back down to data PID, disconnect and reconnect, and we can see that it succeeded. And once again, we've got data PID data updating correctly. So a couple of things to notice. As we have been working with the SIM data user account, the login count has been going up. We also can confirm that we have two different principals for that account and that these principals have a different set of effective permissions. The local host TCP principal has full data access for the data domain pattern using a regular expression of the word data followed by 3 additional characters. So in this video, we've seen how to create a custom role and custom data permissions for that role, and then add a user account to that principal role and thereby restrict access to a particular interface from a particular IP address and restrict access to read and write data in particular data domains. Thanks for watching.